And I'll just welcome everyone. Hey, greetings, everyone. I rarely get stage struck. I rarely get starstruck, but I am actually starstruck because I'm here with Evan Barker, who is a former Democratic campaign operative and political strategist. And she's the author of a book that just hit the bestseller list, the New York Times bestseller list, which, you know, is surrounded by moats ideologically of all real bestseller. And she just found out yesterday. I predict she's going to be very, very, very famous, although that is, you know, less impressive a prediction today than it was, you know, yesterday, and very, very influential. And I started reading her book in the Uber on the way down here and literally couldn't put it down. So I want to welcome Evan Barker. Welcome to Outspoken, Ms. Barker.
Thank you. It's so good to be here, Naomi. I'm such a fan, and yeah, it's great to be here. So thank you.
Amazing. So Ms. Barker is a first-generation college graduate, and she earned her bachelor's degree from the University of Kansas in 2015. She's a columnist, Substack writer, and podcast host, and she lives in Northern California. And you guys, she's written a book that is, I think, going to be an era-defining book. She very courageously has just come out with a book called Nothing Left. I believe the subtitle is Confessions of a Democratic Operative. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
And it says everything that people have been afraid to say, and adds to that, and then I'll stop gushing and just let her tell you herself, but it adds to that really skillful storytelling. She's a wonderful writer. And it's also a Bildungsroman. It's the story of a young woman coming to maturity, coming to consciousness, idealistic. It's sort of a portrait of the artist as a young woman. And it's unmissable. So you have to order it now. Order it now from Amazon because you have to keep it on the list. You have to move it up the list, and you have to keep it on the list for months and months and months. Ms. Barker, I've said enough. Let's start with what you knew every bridge you'd be burning. They don't let you go back. What led you to take the leap and write this book?
Yes, and I actually wrote in the very first intro of the book, I said, I'm going to write as if everyone I know is dead, because in many ways they are. And, you know, I started out in Democratic politics in 2008. As I write in my book, I grew up in a mostly Democratic union household family, you know, a lot of blue collar construction workers, and spent my childhood going to union halls. My grandfather dressed up as Santa Claus at the union Christmas party every year. You know, that was my childhood. And on top of that, I was also born with a rare pre-existing health condition similar to cystic fibrosis. And, you know, my parents struggled throughout my childhood to get me health care because before the ACA, you know, it was tough, and it was tough for people like me. And, you know, we weren't poor enough for Medicaid, but we weren't rich enough or well off enough to pay for a high existing pool always. So, you know, it was hard. It's just so children, you know, back then could be denied health insurance. And so it delayed my access to care. And I was really afraid of graduating high school, actually, because I didn't know if I could go to college. Neither of my parents went to college. My dad didn't even finish high school. And I knew that I needed health insurance. And so I thought I would need to go get a job at like a corporation, if I could get one, you know, that offered me healthcare. And so that's how I got activated and worked really hard to elect Barack Obama. And, you know, he ended up passing a policy. I know there's a lot of problems with Obamacare, but the pre-existing clause was groundbreaking, and it did change my life. And so I thought every campaign would be like that. And I thought the Democratic Party would forever be like the summer of 2008. And it wasn't. And, you know, after college, I got reactivated. You know, I kind of did a few campaigns in between. I did Hillary Clinton's campaign in 2015 and some other smaller races. But I got reactivated after Donald Trump was elected. And at that point, I went to the East Coast. I'm ashamed to say this, but at that time, I wanted to leave the Midwest. I didn't understand how people in my family who had, been Democrats their whole lives could vote for Donald Trump in 2016. At that point, I did not understand it. And I just wanted to work to get him out of office. And so I went to the East Coast to get away from the Midwest, and ended up finding myself surrounded by, I guess you'd call them limousine liberals, in New Jersey. And, kind of got disillusioned pretty quickly with the establishment wing of the Democratic Party. I worked for a woman there whose husband was worked at Lehman Brothers. He was involved in the financial crisis in 2008. She was kind of, I would describe, a pussy hat wearing housewife, whose husband was bankrolling her run for Congress. And she didn't really want to talk about any of the hard-hitting issues, just seemed too out of touch to represent regular people. And so after that campaign ended, I ended up actually finding myself back home, back in Kansas, just like Dorothy, I guess. And, went back home and found the Bernie Sanders movement. I ended up working for a progressive labor lawyer there who was running in a very important swing district. Mm-hmm. And at that point in time, I was actually with AOC and Bernie the first day they ever met. I had no idea. I had no idea that I was witnessing history, right? That this was the very early iterations of this movement that we're now seeing take over the party. And at that point in time, I was not disillusioned with the progressives. I thought that Bernie Sanders and that wing had all of the answers, that, I viewed them as truth tellers. I viewed them as people that were willing to criticize the establishment that had led us to the election of Donald Trump. And I went really high up in progressive. I ended up from that campaign, went to national progressive politics, and ended up working for a fundraising firm in Washington, D.C. that was behind some of the biggest stars of the progressive left, Ilhan Omar, Jamal Bowman, Cori Bush, Abdul El-Sayed, Summer Lee, Justice Democrats. I could go on and on and on. And so, but at some point, grew very disillusioned with the progressives as well, and ended up leaving the party in 2024.
Wow. Well, that's a lot.
I know.
That's a really good summary of kind of the biographical or action arc. And I just want to highlight for readers who may not yet be familiar with the kinds of things you're bringing to the fore. What's so kind of riveting and groundbreaking about this book is that it tells the story of that disillusionment, right? Mm-hmm. And specifically, I want to zero in on some of the things you said, Ms. Barker, about limousine liberals and, pussy hat wearing housewives and people who are out of touch. Because to me, if there's a headline of your book, it's how the Democrats stopped speaking for working class white people in the heartland of America, who used to be their base, their ideological base, the whole union movement, right, represented the voice of working class at that time, overwhelmingly white people in the American economy who didn't have champions, and goes back to the progressive era. And some of the most perceptive things you have to say, which is why I'm so glad you wrote this book with your background, have to do with class and race.
Yes. Class.
And just, I want you to talk more about this, but I just want to stress that can I say Evan? Can I call you Evan?
Oh, yeah.
Evan will describe lunch in an elegant restaurant, Tory Burch wearing, ladies who are ashamed of their white privilege.
Yeah.
And she talks about identity politics and about, this was very profound, about a lesbian woman of color who was highly bankrolled by this machine in such a way that her white male candidate that she was working for had really good progressive ideas, couldn't get purchased, right? She talks about a system that foregrounds and underwrites candidates on the basis of their race or their sexuality in a way that kind of discriminates against candidates who otherwise have merit. Some of the most perceptive things she says are, I realized I realized these wealthy white people were no longer caring about the things that mattered to my mom and grandma
Yes.
in a trailer home, who live on a fixed income, etc. Speak more about that, because that was like head exploding.
Yeah, I think somebody wrote a review of the book, and he said that class animates me on every single page of the book, and I would definitely say that's true, even through the very end, you know. But I think part of the reason that I do come from a different type of background than most of the people that I encountered in Democratic politics is part of the reason that I was able to see the flaws in what they were saying. I do describe the kind of like the first time I was working in these spaces, and I went to the Dems Club in Washington, D.C., which that's what they call it. The Dems Club. It's like the shorthand. I think it's really called the Democratic Club. But I walk in and I'm thinking, okay, this is where all the Democratic members of Congress spend a lot of their time. It's where they take people to eat, donors to lunch, stuff like that. And I'm thinking, I'm meeting my coworkers for the first time, and I get in there and it's like a country club. It's like I worked at a country club briefly in college. And it reminded me, I was a waitress there, and it reminded me of that. And the clientele was very similar. And, crystal water cups and white linens. And then I start talking to my colleagues, and they're bragging about how they're going to make college tuition free at the same time that they're talking about their extravagant trips to Europe and to Australia, and asking me about one of the questions that I never forgot was they were like, do you do berries? And I didn't know what they were talking about. I thought they were talking about strawberries or something. I really didn't know. And I was like, oh, what's that? And they're like, they tell me, oh, it's a gym membership. It turns out it's a $500 a month gym membership.
Oh my gosh.
And this was like in 2018. And they asked me where I went to the gym, and I was like, oh, I go to Planet Fitness. It was like $10 a month, gets the job done. And I remember they were like disgusted.
How did you pick that up? Was that a facial expression? Was
facial expression and just the cold shoulder from the rest of it. And it was also interesting because I was hearing from family at this time that things like free college sort of, you'd think that like this is the part of the disconnect, is like they think that this will ingratiate them to working class people, non-college educated people, but they just kind of view it as a giveaway to the base of the party, the new base of the party, which are highly, college educated people that are up and down, really mobile. And, people like my uncle, who I talk about later in the book, he said to me, he was like, nobody ever paid my union dues. I paid my union dues my whole life, and myself, and those people are going to get their student loans wiped, and they're going to make twice as much in their lifetime as I will. And so, just policies like that. I think that progressives have this idea that working people want everything to be free or handed to them or something. And they want a social safety net to exist. Definitely. And I think that's where the Republicans kind of get things wrong. But they don't really want everything to just be free. What they really want are opportunities. And so, that was kind of like the first. And then I would go to fundraisers in New Jersey. So it wasn't just like, oh, go ahead.
Can I just interrupt for just 1 minute, Evan? So if I were working on those campaigns, and, I was a campaign consultant many generations before you were running campaigns, but I recognize some of the things you described, like the bubble of excitement and magic. A candidate or someone who's really famous. If I had you around my campaign, and that was your job at one point, was to go to different campaigns and kind of help them understand how AOC won so that they could reproduce it, I would think this young woman has a really important experience base and knowledge base. And I'm really going to listen to her when she talks about policies that will and won't resonate with working class, middle class people in the heartland or, on both coasts. Why couldn't you say something like that to the deciders around you and be listened to? Like your view is so valuable.
Well, I don't think they see it that way. I think that they really just looked at me and only saw my skin color. I don't think they really saw. I don't think most of them ever really got to know me, to be honest with you, or even knew or understood fully my background. And I actually, one of my former people that I've worked with, I don't want to say who, but reached out to me recently, and he said reading your book was like reading about a friend that had died and realizing I never really got to know them and wishing that I had more time with them.
Oh my God. Wait, he's saying that you calling out the Democratic Party is like reading about a friend who has died?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. And that realizing that he never knew them, and that I think is accurate. And so I think that they, so much focus on identity, that they, a lot of the people, especially the white people, they're really the enforcers of all of this in the party. They kind of just assume that everybody had a life like them. They can't fathom that what it would be like to have parents that were married, many times. My mom was married 6 times, and to come from like instability and being moved around a lot. I went to a inner city school, actually. I'm probably one of the few white people that work in progressive politics that went to a majority Black school. And so I think that they never really wanted my opinions on those things, first of all. And I think secondly, and I talk about this more later in the book too, is I think they kind of wrote people like my family off. Like they didn't really want them anymore. They didn't.
Let me ask more about this. Yeah says thank you for this. And I'm sure a lot of people listening of whatever color who are working class or struggling, as most of America is, living paycheck to paycheck, they're listening to you and thinking, thank God this young woman is articulating these experiences. We are being forgotten, certainly by the Democratic Party. Why would the Democrats with whom you worked not look at their own polling and see that they need to not lose white working class people in order just to keep getting elected?
They see their polling. They have a different theory of change, basically, than you or I do.
What's that?
They don't think that the answer is to persuade anyone. I know they believe that turnout. There's two different methods, or three actually. There's 3 options with earning votes in campaigns, and it's either turning out your base, persuading people like Republicans or independents, disaffected voters to vote for you, or doing all like both of those things is the third option. I think you have to do both of those things in order to actually win. But the progressives have this belief that I meant talk about the progressives because they've really kind of like influenced the agenda in the party and heavily, and it pushed the Democrats in their new direction. And so they have a lot of like power, actually. And they do represent the new base of the party, in my opinion. But they essentially just think that they just need to turn out people, and that they do that by being more far to the left, by being more progressive. And so they don't think that it's really worth persuading people that if you voted for Donald Trump, I mean, even right now on my media tour, I'm kind of experiencing this where you'd think that a lot of left-leaning media would want to talk to me.
I would have thought so.
They don't so far, really. A few group, like one outlet the other day quoted me, which I was extremely grateful for. Politico did actually quote me and plug my book. But most of them don't, and I think it's because I did end up voting for Trump in 2024, and so they're just like, well, she's gone. Like
Oh,
if
wow.
she was able to do that, then she's never gonna come around to us, or like, what's the point? Why should we listen to her?
But because you've just
I
answered
know.
their question, right? She walked away. There
I
are
know.
other people like her. Let's figure out why she walked away. She's telling us, right? She's narrating it every step of the way.
And
But
if you read
that's
my book, you'll see I'm not a Republican now. You know what I mean? Like, I did do that, but um I didn't become a Republican because I have some fundamental disagreements with the Republican Party.
and you
So
say early on in your book, just because I'm being critical of the Democratic establishment doesn't mean I'm being partisan as a supporter of the Republican Party.
right. And I'm not just saying that to get people to like me. Like, I really do feel that way. I have some fundamental, I have to explain this even to my own family sometimes, because they're like, why don't you just, come over? And I'm like, because I don't like, I'm afraid of losing my health insurance.
Right.
I have,
Right.
and there's just beliefs like with unions and stuff that I don't trust the Republican Party on yet at all. So
So
yeah,
I
there's
will
just
say that, you're the person the Republican Party should listen to when they're crafting.
well, I feel like they should, but I don't want to push. I don't feel like that's my place to tell
Right,
them what to do.
right.
I just got here, so why would they listen to me? You know what I mean? But and I also feel more people accuse me a lot of like, oh, you don't talk about Republicans as much. And I'm like, well, that's because I feel I still have this deep emotional attachment to the Democrats.
Mhm.
And that's where I worked, and that's
Mhm.
the scene I know, and I
Right.
know them, and I feel like I have a lot to say about them.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah, you don't have to, I mean,
I don't have to justify it to you, but
not to me.
I just sorry, I'm kind of just talking out loud here
No,
almost, but
that's fine, I understand, and also, you've just hit the list, so your life is gonna get even more crazy, and people are gonna project onto you even more aggressively, and, I
yeah, it'll
just
be fun.
and you will handle it beautifully, but I'm not sure what I'm saying except that, I'm cheering you on. It takes a lot of courage to write the book you did. I have to credit Simon and Schuster, my former publisher, for publishing it. I
Yes.
think it takes courage for publishing a book like yours.
Oh my
And
gosh,
I
the
think,
best editor.
sorry?
The best editor.
Oh, good. And I think that you were very, very fair at, I haven't read the whole book yet, but so far
I
you've been
was.
scrupulously fair in your presentation. So let's go back to people in the Democratic circles, the role of class and identity politics,
Yeah.
right? Because that's so at the heart of it. You're saying that they don't care if working class Americans hate them, and not just white Americans, but they're losing Latino voters who are not all about men and girls sports or boys and girls sports, who are very family oriented, who are religious. I mean, they're losing giant chunks of people. And
Right.
that doesn't matter to them because they have a different theory of how to win elections.
Well, I think that they don't wanna moderate, on a lot of these issues. I think that's what it comes down to. It's like, but I think they kind of missed something critical, obviously, that they talked a lot about, um, you know, they tried to appeal to Latinos. I remember I worked with some groups that, they were all about the Latinx community, and they're just so tone deaf as to the
Right.
fact that the cultural values, especially between working class Latinos and working class Black men, and older working class Black people as well, and white working class people are actually a lot closer aligned than they are with white progressives and Bushwick.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's something that they weren't really accounting for, because I do hear the Democrats, especially progressives, talk a lot about working class people,
Right.
but I always knew and I understood when I was working for them that they weren't really talking about my family. They were talking about non-white working class people. And I saw them shift a lot. There was a lot of like strange, I view them as very strange, like messaging tactics that nobody really talks about, that I go into detail later in my book. One of them is called race class narrative. I have a whole chapter titled Race Class Narrative, and it's pushed by sorry, I took antibiotics recently, so I'm like a little my stomach's a little upset, but
I'm sorry.
it's okay. So it was pushed by like donors basically and consultants. And one of them in my book that I talk about is a woman named Leah Hendricks, whose grandfather was an oil baron, and I think she had a lot of white guilt and a lot of guilt about inheriting, you know, a lot of wealth. And it's basically this idea that every time you talk about like an economic issue, you have to tie it to race, you have to racialize it.
Oh, wow.
And they think that it will unite Black and white working class people, but it build like a multiracial working class coalition. But it actually has the opposite effect. And so, like, for example, if we're talking about how grocery prices are really high right now, like grocery prices are really high. This is how they would train a Democratic politician to talk about this issue. Grocery prices are really high, but we know that brown and Black communities are suffering the most. But we need to do X, Y, and Z to make grocery prices affordable for all Americans, right? This is literally how politicians were trained to talk about issues and are still talking about issues, actually.
Wow.
And they didn't realize that, and there was actually an independent study done by these two nerds at Yale that don't have anything to do with politics and are just nerds and wanted to look into it. And they found that using things like RCN, race class narrative, actually had a negative impact on working class white people, made them dislike the way that the politicians were speaking, and had no effect on non-white working class people. It did not have a positive or a negative effect.
Right.
So you'd think that they'd abandon these sort of strategies.
Right.
But, you know, this is part of the reason I wrote my book, is because I wanted the public to know about it.
Oh, and from what you describe, it's a handful of donors whose money, which is true on both sides, of course, but in the Democrats, whose money is shaping this messaging, which is so, I would say, divisive. You know, it's having the opposite effect.
Right.
And internally, nothing. There are no discussions about, hey, this is alienating people. This is not having the effect we want.
It's hard to push back.
Right. It almost seems like your book so far really confirms my lived experience years, that in leadership democratic circles, not maybe grassroots, but ideology is more important than outcomes. Right.
Yes.
Like you said a few beats ago, that they're more wedded to they don't want to move on. They don't want to compromise these positions. Could you say more about that? Am I misunderstanding?
Yeah, I almost want to, there's like a part of, can I read something from the book that I wrote? Let me just find it really quickly. I wish I had it just pulled already. But it was chapter 13. Chapter 13. Just a second.
This is so heartbreaking.
It is. It actually, I'm still heartbroken over it, to be honest with you. I can't, sometimes I still feel, it feels surreal that I'm even talking to you and sharing all these stories. I never thought that this would happen, but okay. So let's see. I talk about a Democratic consultant who was starting to talk, another guy named David Shore, who actually bravely did call out some of these issues, and still works in Democratic politics. And he pointed out that the party was run by privileged college kids, which I knew was true based on my own experiences. And he encouraged Democrats not to talk about unpopular social justice issues. I go on to say that my coworkers viewed Shore as someone who was trying to drag the party to the middle. They were not fans of his ideas. They thought he was getting too much attention and viewed his analysis as a threat to our priorities. But I'd push back on them, telling them that he was just saying that defund the police was unpopular, so don't talk about it. They'd argue with me, insisting that if candidates governed only on what was popular, they'd miss opportunities to shift public opinion.
Mhm.
Lillian cited the Green New Deal as an example of this,
Mhm.
insisting the policy was nothing until AOC and Sunrise Movement pushed it into the national conversation. This was the progressive mindset.
Mm,
Unpopular policy was not weakness, but strength, a
right,
sign of moral leadership. And
right.
at this point in my career, I thought it was a problem.
Wow,
Uh,
that's profound. And that literally boils down to we know better. And we just need to, that phrasing on the left, how do we? I've always felt it was so cringy that they don't say, like, how do we learn from what we're hearing from our voters? It's always like, how do we teach these
right.
united people to have better points of view?
Moral views, right. Yeah.
And let me just jump in there with Mary Klein. You're getting a lot of strong reactions from our audience, which is wonderful, all positive. The real controllers do not care. They only want to create divisiveness. They care not what party gets in, as long as whatever gets in fits whatever narrative or goal they are pushing. And then Casey says, Amen, Mary. And I'm sure we could have a parallel discussion, about Republicans making parallel mistakes. But
Absolutely. They have their own set of luxury beliefs.
they do, and they can be just, I mean, I could name them, right? Like being completely rigid on abortion policy,
Yeah.
even when,
Well, although to his credit, Trump has kind of backed away from that, but yeah.
I mean, I think the Trump administration is doing a lot of super smart things in terms of they're actually very centrist.
Mm.
I think MAGA and Maha are playing well together, but that's a topic for another day, perhaps. There's so much to cover in your book, but when I have to ask you this, that quote is so profound. It says so much. And yet these people, this is not sustainable, right? If you don't keep cheating and you don't keep importing people from other countries who will vote for you, sooner or later, if you run on unpopular policies, you're going to run out of victories.
Voters, right.
And so you wrote your book, of course, before the headlines that are all around us right now about these, many people are calling it the red-green alliance, the jihadi Marxists. You may not see the terms the same way, but on where I sit in my corner of the internet, and my own analysis, there's a lot of money flowing to, I'm sitting in New York, which is run by Zoran Mamdani, and he's got, like, the DSA has actual communist policies.
Yeah, for
They
sure.
really do.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about this weird pull to the left, right? Now that you've seen these headlines manifest, because there's always like a 6-month delay between the time a book is
I
finished.
know.
Yeah.
I hit the right time.
Well, you'll write a sequel. But that in retrospect, do you think that pull to the left or the justice movement or, some of these organizations you describe as kind of bubbling up and pulling mainstream Democrats leftward?
Absolutely. And as you get further into the book, I mean, I really write about the formation of this movement that we're seeing manifest now. I mean, that the same people that that I worked with back in those years are the same people behind Zoran now. That are the same people that just got, the Justice Democrats, a group that I work with, that I worked with, that our firm worked with, and I worked with in the book. I talk about them. They recruited Daria-Lisa Chevalier to run for office.
Wow.
Yes. And so if people want to understand, I think this is why, and I'm actually not surprised about these headlines. It was kind of difficult pitching the book because I feel like a lot of people didn't really understand why somebody from the progressive far left, like them writing a tell-all, was going to be so important this cycle.
Mm-hmm.
But I did know that it would be important because I know that my former colleagues know that in order to shape the future of the Democratic Party, they have to do really well in midterm elections. And so this is what they did when AOC won in 2018, is they got all of the Democratic primary presidential candidates to run on the Green New Deal, just about all of them, and Medicare for All. And they're going to do the same thing, especially if Abdul El-Sayed wins in Michigan in November. It means the Democratic Party, as we know it, is gone, and that the progressives are fully in charge. And so it's a real reckoning moment, and I wasn't surprised. Like, I'm not, because I just know that they've built up, they've become so much stronger, and the base is radicalized too. In reaction to Donald Trump, the base of the party has radicalized, and so, if people want to understand why we have Zoran, if people want to understand why we have Darius is going to be the most radical person that's ever been elected to Congress, is going to be in Congress, this November. They I don't want to sound like an advertisement, but they do need to read the book, because it's that's what it's all about. It's about how we built this movement. And I left the movement because I saw how toxic it was, and I saw the damage that it was doing, not only to the Democratic Party, but to the country.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. So the money, would you say, and I am sorry that I did not get a chance in my
No, it's okay.
the way at the end, but
We can do a part two.
Tonight. But the evidence that foreign money is flowing into our system to sway the, to hollow out the Democratic Party from within. What's your view of that?
I honestly never saw that. I can't say that I saw that, because I didn't.
Would you say it's organic, that it's an organic American radicalism?
It is. That's the harder thing for people to accept, is that it is like homegrown. It is the donors are in the US. They are United States citizens. I mean, some of them have dual citizenship, sure. But they are, it is coming from within our walls. So
And
I think
what
that's
do
the
you-
thing.
Okay, sorry.
No, it's surprising to a lot of people, but that is, I talk a lot about the donors in the book too.
Right. What is radicalizing the base?
I think it's the reaction to Donald Trump. I think, but it's also the failures of the Democratic Party. The establishment wing of the party has failed. Like they failed in the sense that he's been elected now, and that they keep losing. And so I think that when, and on top of that, the economy, it's not great. People are struggling still.
Right.
And so the stock market's doing well, but regular people that, work paycheck to paycheck are having a really hard time. And so I think that unique combination of all three of those factors, the Democratic base is looking for an alternative. They want an alternative to what Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer have been selling. And because this movement is the only movement that's really built in, that's already functioning, that has an infrastructure, that has very smart, competent people behind them. The people that I worked with, they know what they're doing. They're professionals. And so, the base is going to drift into this direction. And then I also think it's a reflection of them losing working class voters, because working class voters do not like these kinds of policies. We're not, like people like my mom, she's very common sense. And so, they're not going to buy what they're selling. And so I think it's that combination.
So I get it. Wow. So it's a vicious circle. They've given up on ever winning over your mom.
Right.
And so nothing grounds them to the kinds of policies that would bring her back.
Right, exactly. And on top of that, there's a donor infrastructure and a consultant network and organizations, and you've got a failed Democratic establishment on top of it.
Right. Okay.
So it's kind of the perfect storm for these people to come to rise. Yeah.
Let me push back a tiny bit.
Go for it.
You just said answered half my follow-up question, but if one feels that the Democratic establishment has failed and Trump's taken over, and you need to find a more powerful way to take these set of realities on, I would have thought radicalism would look more like turn of the century progressivism, like we're going to actually have, free healthcare for everybody. We're actually going to make college affordable. We're actually going to support unions, raise the minimum wage, et cetera, like real working class policies. And not, I don't see how there's an indigenous grassroots, by indigenous, I mean American grassroots groundswell toward, we need to support trans youth so biological boys can play in girls' sports teams. We need to have Israel be the center of every single conversation,
Right.
and Gaza be the center of every single conversation in Missouri and in Brooklyn and so on. That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing I can say, because I truly did not see foreign money influence.
No, I'm not saying there is.
Yeah.
Why those policies? They're not popular. They're weird.
They are weird. I think it's because, again, I go back to it's the education polarization. I think it's the radicalization. It used to be that non-college educated working class people voted for Democrats and college educated suburbanites voted for Republicans.
Right.
And I think because Donald Trump came along and promised to bring back manufacturing, actually gave a voice to those people that had kind of been forgotten by the Democratic Party, there's been this shift. And I think because of the new base of the Democratic Party being more from academia, college campuses, more, where they become more radicalized, right? On college campuses, their priorities have shifted. And so they're not thinking about my uncle's union in Missouri. They're not thinking about the fact that, Obamacare is expensive and that healthcare needs to be fixed. They are thinking about their niche luxury issues.
Wow. Yeah. I think win national elections running on niche luxury issues?
Absolutely not. No, it's existential for the Democratic Party. I really wish Democrats would read my book, but
I was going to say, I'm only going to keep you for 4 more minutes because I want you to have a rest before you.
I need to drink water and eat a banana. Yeah.
But have you had people soliciting you to come advise them, whether on the left or the right?
Definitely. Yes. I've had, well, it's interesting. After I left the Democratic Party, I actually had someone reach out to ask me to come work for an independent in Nebraska, and I declined because I just didn't. I felt like he was too aligned with the progressives, and I didn't know if I could trust them, to be honest with you. I didn't want to get sucked back into that whole scene, if it was going to end up being like it was before. And then, yeah, I've had some Republicans reach out as well. Yeah, definitely. But again, I really think you can't be both. You can't be a pundit and an operative. I think you can be one or the other. And so right now I'm a pundit. I'm giving commentary and I'm writing books. And
good.
I think if you're an operative, you kind of have to be behind the scenes.
Of course. All right. Well, then what's next for Evan Barker? Might you run yourself someday?
I will not run for office. When you get to the call time chapter, you'll see why. But I
read that. It's
you did? Okay. Yeah. It's like, I can't do that. But I don't know, Naomi. I've never really, everyone wants to know, it's like, what's next? I've never really lived my life with a plan. I haven't. Maybe that's also, I wasn't ever really a striver type. So I don't live like that. I just take it day by day. And I would like to write another book. I like writing books in class.
Good.
So I think, maybe writing a book more centered on my family and less political could be interesting. I don't know. I really like writing though. That's definitely my favorite thing to do.
Well, you're such a beautiful writer. I promise my last question for now, and then I'll let you go. But I should say, door open anytime. We would love to
talk to you again.
Applications. Yeah. We'd love to, syndicate whatever podcasts you do. You're so smart and you have such a giant future ahead of you. And I just want to also compliment you and your mom and dad and your grandparents, because they raised you've overcome, or you're still overcoming, formidable obstacles. You had health issues, or you may still have health issues.
I do. Yeah.
I'm sorry about that.
Okay.
But your spirit is absolutely indomitable. And you also show such integrity standing up for the good of the country, really, in writing this very difficult book, which will make a lot of people angry at you. I just really applaud you
Nice.
so much, for
Thank
that
you.
integrity. And they raised a very strong, principled young woman. And Casey says, I appreciate you both. Thank you. Final question, I promise. These telegenic sort of brown people who, let me say that in a way that can't be taken out of context. It seems as if there are candidates, and you describe AOC being this shy bartender who's now on a world stage. They may be super smart, they may be super ready, but it does seem like the DSA or these far left entities are kind of identifying progressive candidates of color,
Right, yeah.
sexual orientation, very jacked. They look good in, they present well. Like I would say that's racist personally.
Definitely.
But what is the process by which
I noticed that when I was like, oh my God, they're like, why are they not endorsing any white men anymore at all?
What's the process, right? Like I know a white man who literally high up on the left who literally said, I discovered AOC. Right?
Yeah.
Like do they have
Who was it?
No, but seriously, do they have like casting agents? Like where are they finding the
there's a process. The process is like it's called candidate recruitment. And and so they'll the way that they recruited Graham Plattner, for instance, was like just kind of like looking through the phone book almost, and so I mean they go through local political groups. I think Justice Democrats just like at some point, I don't know if they still do this, but they used to have just like a call out on their website. And I think that's AOC was nominated.
Oh, wow.
It is like a casting process. Yes. Mm-hmm. And I think that, the obsession with non-white, non-cis male, sorry to use their language, but candidates it's a reflection of the people that work in the party having a lot of white guilt and the obsession with identity politics, but also the way that the Democrats have sort of organized themselves. I talk about Charisse and Brent and how she had a lot of endorsements available to her that he did not, because right. The Republicans don't do that. They don't do identity-based endorsements, and so it's like it's their coalition strategy, and it's very ingratiating. It's very complicated because it's just so ingrained, and it's going to be really hard to root out. And also, I heard this recently. I can't cite the name of the study, but there was a study that was done that said that Democratic primary voters prefer actually to vote for non-white candidates. So there might be something to do with that as well. And
how ironic that in 2026 it's the Republicans who are,
not racist
and not on the content of the character.
I know, it's crazy.
Sexual orientation, crazy times. Evan Barker, how do people get your book, and where do they find your writings, and how do they support you?
Nothing Left, Confessions of a Democratic Operative. You can buy it at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, anywhere books are sold, although I don't know if every Barnes & Noble is carrying it. Unfortunately, especially if you live in a more blue area, you should probably try to get it online. Hopefully that'll change now that I made the list. But yeah, and then you can find me on X, Evan WCH, and I also have a Substack that I'm going to start getting a lot more active with.
And what's the title of your Substack?
Just Evan Barker, evanbarker.substack.com. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here. I predict great things for this writer, this commentator, and honestly, kind of already a heroine of, I'm going to call you a patriot. I'm going to call you a patriot.
I love it. I'm
a partisan. I think you are just an exemplary American. I'm going to thank you. I'm going to let you go, and I'll thank our sponsor. And I hope you have a wonderful time and go from strength to strength on the list.
Thank you.
Barker, talk soon. I'm going to sign you off now. There we go. Wow, you guys, you've got to get that book, Nothing Left. And what a lot of truth in a very short amount of time. It's honestly a page turner. It's so gripping. And this young lady, has seen it all, right? She's seen from the inside what's hollowed out the Democratic Party. I think it remains to be seen, where the money's flowing from. That's something we could debate in the future, but there's definitely, half of the country is in play, right? In the hands of people who don't really reflect what Americans say they need and want. I think that's something historically completely unprecedented in our country, in our culture, and you have to read Nothing Left by Evan Barker. Have to. Also, honestly, ordering it from Amazon in the first few weeks that it is published is very important, because bookstores will promote a book and news outlets will cover a book only if it stays on the bestseller list or moves up the bestseller list. So keep ordering that book, gift it. Everyone needs to read it. So let's acknowledge our sponsors, without whom we could not bring you these conversations. When credible doctors start paying attention to repurposed medications, it's worth asking why. Dr. Harvey Risch, who is a friend of ours, we love him, former professor of epidemiology at Yale and now serving on the president's cancer panel, is helping to lead that conversation. A new groundbreaking observational study from the Wellness Company analyzed the off-label use of ivermectin and mebendazole in nearly 200 cancer patients treated by licensed doctors across cancers such as breast, prostate, lung, and colon cancers. The results are hard to ignore. After 6 months, 84% of patients experienced a clinical benefit, including stable disease, tumor regression, or no evidence of disease. This is not lab data. This is real-world patient experience. Dr. Risch, who's also chief epidemiologist at the Wellness Company, called it an exciting signal deserving of serious scientific investigation, and recommends more accessible, lower-cost cancer care options such as this. And that is why the Wellness Company makes it easy to access an ivermectin and mebendazole formula using medications that are FDA approved for other indications and are being studied for additional use. It's doctor prescribed and USA compounded, designed to support patients exploring these emerging approaches under medical guidance. Ordering is simple and fully digital. Just fill out a quick intake form, a licensed doctor reviews it, and your prescription ships directly to your door. Head to dailyclouthealth.com. That's dailyclouthealth.com, and use code dailyclout to save up to $60 off and get free shipping. dailyclouthealth.com. Tell loved ones if they're dealing with a cancer diagnosis. You've got to get the word out about this promising new approach. And thank you to the Wellness Company. And you remember that if you value these conversations, and believe it or not, we're in the top 200 for news commentary in the US, in Canada, in Australia, off and on in countries around the world. And our network, the Daily Clout Network, is also hitting those top 1 or 200 in countries around the world. Well, it takes resources to keep these coming. So go over to Substack and subscribe to Outspoken. I'm going to be launching my nonfiction writing monthly webinar, and you can subscribe there and be part of that. And you can also go over to Daily Clout, make a one-time donation. And honestly, without your donations and support and subscriptions, we can't keep our doors open. With them, we can do powerful work like this. And as I always say, you get the media you support. It's really true in journalism. There's no such thing as a free lunch. If you want nonsensical AI propaganda, you can get it for free. If you want hard-hitting journalism, you do have to subscribe, you guys, or I'm asking you to subscribe, because that's how we stay open, and we bring you news on Daily Clout, opinion, essays, interviews such as these. Love you guys. That was Nothing Left by Evan Barker. You have to read it, and I will see you very, very soon. This has been Outspoken.